Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So tonight's subject is the Bodhisattva and suffering. And Zen has often been accused of quietude, of sitting here on our cushions doing nothing when other people are out demonstrating against the war or something like that. And I could understand that. We've got only a few examples I can think of the priests in Soto Zen who have really gone out and gotten arrested. Aitken Roshi was one of them, Aitken Roshi from Hawaii. And even when he was in a wheelchair, very close to his death, he wanted to go out at noontime and demonstrate against the Iraq War at the time. He certainly demonstrated about the Vietnam War, but the Iraq War was what was going on at the time. And he just was not able to get anybody to take him downtown with his wheelchair and make it happen. And he was dreadfully disappointed. I happened to be visiting in Hawaii at the time, and I would have loved to have demonstrated with him. Taigen Leighton, Reverend Taigen Leighton, who used to be at San Francisco Zen Center, now is in Chicago. And he would regularly get arrested on Fridays during the Iraq War. He and a couple of other priests from San Francisco Zen Center would go down to the Federal Building and demonstrate and get arrested because they would refuse to leave the building. So some others, have gone out very publicly, but not so many. And so we get accused of quietude, of not going out and demonstrating. And yet the Bodhisattva is one of action. I have to say I've very much enjoyed Bill Conover and Calvin Malone and I, Bill is here, Calvin Malone and I went to Fan Day, Faith Action Network, and we met with our senator and our representative in the House, and campaigned, advocated for compassionate legislation. And it wasn't so extraordinary a thing, but it was good. It was very good to be among the faith communities, going out and being public, and some quite forceful, passionate, and dedicated to studying and advocating all the year, not just on the one day that we go out. And it felt very good to do that. And then there were about 8 or 10 of us, I guess, who went out on to the march on the 5051 day. And that felt very good to do. Very good to be among the couple of thousand people. I said 10, and then it got to be, well, it was 5, and then it got to be, okay, it's 3, and maybe it was 2, but it felt like 10,000 because it was so vigorous and so energetic in the spirit of peacefulness, and yet it was not so peaceful that you didn't know the purpose and the strength of the people who held up their signs. We were few who did not have signs with us. Next time we know, we must have a sign. So we are in this kind of situation. I was around during the Vietnam War, and at that point, I had 3 children, married with 3 children, and I could not go out and demonstrate the way my sister was demonstrating in New York, and people getting arrested for their rallying in New York. And I wanted very much to do that, but I couldn't because I had 3 children. So instead, I volunteered at Valley Forge Army Hospital with the Red Cross, working with soldiers who'd been amputated. And I felt that that was equal to the demonstrating against the war, because those poor fellows coming back from war with no hands, sometimes leg lost, or I saw one with no arms. And we very much needed to be with them, to work with them. I mean, imagine a guy with no hands trying to open up one of these little plastic ketchup things to put ketchup on his hamburger during lunchtime. We can't imagine such things. But there are people who have fought for us who are in that situation. So there's all kinds of things that the Bodhisattva can do. And I want to speak just very briefly, because we're going to do an exercise together, that when we are sitting Zazen, we do not sit inside ourselves. We sit outside of ourselves in the world on behalf of others. Our sitting is not internalized, trying to bring peace to our own fretful minds. Our focus is out here, right here, and with everything, and not stuck inside in our emotional distress. It is out with others, on behalf of others. The Bodhisattva acts for others, not for oneself, and not for one's personal suffering. We recognize the suffering of others, and that is the essence of what our practice is, our Zazen. It is not for me, or it's not for ourselves. It's for the sake of others. If we really sit in that way, we kind of don't think. The thinking apparatus gets very quiet in that particular mode of sitting, in which we are addressing the suffering in the world. Maybe we pick one person. Maybe we pick a child in Gaza who is starving. Or maybe we pick a mother giving birth out on the street in Gaza. Or a child, or a woman being raped, or a man who is being beaten, or something like that. We can pick one incident of suffering and sit with it. And in doing so, we extend our practice to another, and we give it away to the world. That is the best we can do in alleviating suffering. There's all kinds of ways, of course, but in Zazen, we can do that much. And think of one other person to whom we send merit and mercy for their particular situation. And I know that there are many who have said, I can't do this, I can't be with the political situation, I got to turn off, I don't want to hear about it, don't talk to me about politics. I'm not sure that the situation of turning off the money that we give to the world to alleviate suffering is about politics. Well, it is about politics, but it's about suffering. And it's about the great suffering that we are creating. And there's then this question of we're all connected, that we all go around saying, oh, well, so we're all connected. Well, if we are all connected, what are we doing? And how do we reach that world? So this is the subject of the Bodhisattva, who lives in the world of suffering, and we alleviate suffering then in the world. That's our work as Zen practitioners. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So what I want to do tonight is I want to read this paragraph, and then I will give it out to everyone. And we're going to take just a look at where we are and what we can do each. So what I wrote is, and I wrote this is adapted Buddhist thought. Dietrich Bonhoeffer will excuse me, I know, because Dietrich Bonhoeffer was he Lutheran?
Yes.
Yeah, Lutheran minister who acted on behalf of rescuing people during the Nazi regime. He did come to the United States at one point and then opted to go back to Germany. And when he went back, under the guise of working for the government in some way, so they didn't touch him for a while. But he was very active in the underground, rescuing people. And then he was imprisoned. And I understand the story is that one of the prison guards respected him very much and wanted to rescue him, wanted to escape with him. And Bonhoeffer said, no, I'm afraid that you would get in trouble for that, and I don't want to put that upon you. So he stayed and was executed in prison. So this is the thought from Bonhoeffer that I wrote about the Bodhisattva path. I want to say one other thing about, from the Christian standpoint. When I have visited with Christian groups, I ask, is there anything in the Christian story that you can relate to as Buddhists? And the one that has always come to me is Jesus has been arrested, and Peter goes to be with him in prison, and Jesus, of course, is suffering, and he says to Peter, will you watch 1 hour with me? Meaning, let us meditate together, let us be together. And Peter falls asleep, and he does it 3 times. And I said, my feeling about Buddhism is, I said that I hope that we would stay awake. I hope that we would be present with Jesus. As a bodhisattva, we would be present with Jesus in that time of his suffering, and that we would give that to him, recognizing that poor Peter, it must have been awful for him and embarrassing and what have you to have fallen asleep. But I said, that's what I think, because I hear Jesus saying, won't you watch 1 hour with me? Meaning, won't you be a bodhisattva on my behalf and stay awake with me in this time, this terrible time? And that's how I read that, and that's how I tried to relate to a brief Christian story. And I still feel that way about it, that is Jesus asking for somebody among us to be with me, not in your own fear, but outside with you. So here's what I wrote, as I say, based on Dietrich Bonhoeffer's, and he wrote this is from his writings and letters in prison, but it's brief. We are certainly not the Buddha, but as Bodhisattva, we heed the cries of suffering and respond with compassion, which is an impossible burden. We can share in other people's sufferings only to a very limited degree. If we want to be bodhisattvas, we must live in the shared Buddha mind by acting with responsibility and in freedom when the hour of danger comes, and by showing a real sympathy that springs not from fear, but from the liberating, awakened mind in recognition for all who suffer. Mere waiting and looking on is not the bodhisattva way. Bodhisattvas are called to action, not in the first place by one's own sufferings, but by the sufferings of others in our connected world. So that is a preface to 4 questions here that I'm going to give out, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at and answer as best you can if you choose to. And then we'll go into small groups for discussion, and then we'll come back to the whole group, talk a little bit, okay? Why don't you give these out, please? Yeah.